program of self-contained classes at K1-2. So it's flexible. But for students that started, that would continue, for sure. Good question.
Could you tell me how many students are emergent bilingual English learners, and then how is that determined? Is it a self?
That's the next slide.
What I'm doing
is.
next,
I'm
yes.
helping you out. I'm just trying to.
That's okay. Yeah.
The smoothness here.
There was a question back there.
Yeah, I just wanted like a very brief explanation of what's happened with the Spanish language program, because it occurs to me that given that you're going to be, it sounds like you're sending the grade 6 students to a dedicated space, right? If that would, and it's just grade 6? It's not grade 6 through to anything else?
Those are two different district initiatives. So the 6th grade center is for the entire district, and that
All 6th graders.
will be all 6th graders at all buildings. That will be in 2025. For next year, the Spanish dual language programs will be housed together as opposed in 2 separate buildings, and that's K through 5, not 6th grade.
Yeah, so it just seems to me from a funding standpoint, the tripping point is that you have a middle school based system, right? Because you're going to have problems accumulating 20 students if they're dropping out now at the very beginning of the program, as opposed to the snowball effect of having more students as they continue on, you know, like the kindergartners now may be more likely to stay in the program going forward, but you still get this bottleneck in these early years at the middle school, where you have only 2 grades together, right? Or is it 3 grades? I don't come from a middle school system.
Okay.
But you have 6 to 8, right?
Yes, right.
So in this first year, you don't have 20. And this coming year, you may get to 20?
I see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
6 in the future, I think this is your question.
Yes.
So if I don't get it right, let me know. By splitting out 6th grade, it reduces the likelihood of having 20 or more at 6th or the 7-8 building. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would say like by splitting 6 to 8 period right now at the beginning of this program, because it's effectively for the beginning, right? For moving into the middle school,
Yeah.
you have these first wave of students coming in.
So let me clarify. That will still be one school entity.
Okay.
The 6th grade center and 7-8 will be lumped together. So if there's 10 at the 6th grade center and 12 at the 7-8 center, that's 20. That's the 20 minute.
Right,
The
okay.
middle school program will just be in 2 different buildings.
Okay, but that's for Spanish, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so for French.
And it would be for French too.
Oh, is that okay, so
Yeah.
that's the thing I didn't understand.
Yep.
Okay.
It'll
so
be a
still
satellite school, but it's still one big Urbana middle school.
Given your demographics right now, how are you anticipating the next wave of students from the second year of enrollment, right? So like the first year of enrollment was grade 1 and kindergarten, and the grade 1s are now sitting in grade 6, and the kindergartners are now sitting in grade 5, right? Combined, do they equal 20 students next year?
Well, let's go to that slide.
We
Oh,
are,
okay, there we go.
we are both
Great.
of you together going on to talk about enrollment. So we'll go ahead and take a pause and talk about some enrollment, and then we'll come back. So currently, this is the enrollment that we have in our classrooms. Someone had asked about, well, how many are French Lingala, how many are English dominant? This kind of gives you a picture of what that looks like. And what you'll see is at every level, we have more or less a 50-50 balance, but if it is higher, it is on the French Lingala side at every grade level. Looking at kind of historically what our numbers have been, and a lot of times our kindergarten projection is driven by what we see at early childhood, what we know we have in the district. So I did also include the eligibility of students that are French Lingala. So this top row here is our students that are EL French Lingala. These are our families that applied to participate. These are families that were waitlisted. So these stars here on the wait list is because these families were given the opportunity to participate, but either declined because they chose Spanish dual language or for another reason, but they were offered a slot. When we talk about the number of kindergarten of Cage, kids, we call them Cage, that are eligible, something to keep in mind with these numbers that are eligible is that we offer them the opportunity to participate, but some of them have siblings already established in other elementary schools. Some of them have siblings that are enrolled in private schools and just come to Urbana for a preschool. So one of the things that Miss Lily and the early childhood team during spring semester is reach out to these 9 families and say, for next year, what would you like to do? Are you gonna go to your family's building? Would you like to switch? This is your option. So by the time Kindergarten Connection comes around, we have more of an idea if this 9 is really 9 or if it's really 5. So we do look at that. I am hopeful that based on these numbers, we will still be able to continue, having the majority of our applicants participate. But there's always a possibility that we'll have a wait list. Even with our larger program of Spanish dual language, we still have a wait list. Yes?
So, just help me understand what the kinder wait list means. Is that English speakers?
These are English speakers.
Okay.
And then kinder applicants are who?
English speakers.
So the year of 2018,
I understand. Okay. So
19, there were
15
7
kids
students
applied.
that applied. 7 students that applied. The 5 on the Kinder EL are French speakers,
Yeah, these are French.
English
speakers.
learners.
Okay.
The 7 that applied, 5 got in, 2 were waitlisted.
I understand. Okay.
And then you are not going above that 50-50.
Not at
That's
this
what it
time.
looks like.
No.
Why? Why is that?
And
We'll get to that. That's a slide coming up.
21, 22 is 9 and 6.
So 9 ELs, so like I said, we offered to these students and they declined. This 9 could have been larger than what it was at Kindergarten Connection, because we, as you know, we have kids add during the summer and kids that move in.
So 9
So we have- so-
and then 6 were accepted and 2 were waitlisted?
2 were offered seats
Okay,
and
so
they
not
declined
waitlisted,
it.
they
Now, so
Okay.
technically, I mean,
They just
did.
declined, they
They
didn't
did,
waitlist?
yes,
Okay.
yes, that's what the stars are, it means that they chose, so I know for both of those years, we had ones that applied to French and Spanish, they were offered seats in both and selected Spanish instead of French.
So, I'm sorry, Dr. Wiemel, understanding kind of what you've been talking about in terms of French immersion and the changes that makes to requirements and stuff, you said that you're getting guidance from the state on that. The issue around the 50-50 number, declining numbers in French EL, it's been here for several years, so I have kind of a 2-part question. Number one is, why hasn't the state been sought for guidance before this? Because it's kind of reaching a critical point now. But what exactly are you doing in terms of getting that guidance? Like what questions are you asking and of whom, and how is it not clear how the rules are?
I would say, I don't know if you want to, I'll respond and you can add in at the elementary, because I haven't been at the elementary level at all. Like I said, but the commitment has always been to the 50-50 enrollment to maintain a 2-way dual language immersion program under 4 reasons that were addressed earlier around licensure and funding. Why we didn't seek out guidance around foreign language immersion and licensure before is because it was never being considered. Regardless of enrollment shifts or whatnot at that point, this has been a recent request from families as we're having conversations about enrollment. So it's a recent initiative. We're in communication with our ISB consultants. So ISB they're called consultants. They are dedicated staff members in the Division of Multilingual Education under Illinois State Board of Education. They have people assigned to districts to provide guidance, support, to make sure those districts are implementing programming, etc. And her name is Sonia Serrano, that we could share that information if you'd like more. So we're asking questions around what would happen, what are the licensure requirements if we move to a foreign language immersion model? Because in essence, if we were to shift the 50-50 enrollment, it would be eventually, I'm not sure how quickly, become considered a foreign language immersion model. We asked specifically, what happens if we have a classroom of 20 kids, 2 of them are French-speaking English learners that were required to provide the bilingual program to, and 18 are native English speakers. What would happen to that classroom, that teacher? And they are saying, as under right now, what we've just shared, that the licensure it would become a foreign language immersion program. The licensure of that teacher would need to be the foreign language endorsement, not just the TB endorsement. Now, we would hope that the teacher could have both, because if the teacher only, this is another scenario, if the teacher only has foreign language licensure at the elementary level, and 2 of that teacher's students are English learners, that teacher cannot provide, under the law, English language development services that are required by law. Those 2 students would then, in essence, have to be pulled out to be provided bilingual education in ESL from a teacher who has the endorsement in ESL. Does that make sense? That it just creates lots of questions, and that's what we're seeking guidance on from a consultant.
Don't we have that position in Ingrid already with the SNPs?
You have an ESL teacher that provides service to all of our other language speakers. Miss Gibbs works with the French dual language classrooms as a literacy interventionist, which is part of that conversation that has been had recently about those positions transitioning to something different. She does not provide ESL services to the French DL classes. Her ESL coursework is for the students that speak other language in non-French DL classes.
For the 50-50 model, is it like a stated, like it must, when it begins, it must be 50-50?
It's not stated, so that's what we're trying to get more guidance on.
Yeah, I said
It's
this
very,
in the
it's
board
very
meeting.
unclear, yeah,
Okay, because it doesn't, right, it doesn't say 50-50.
right.
And like my child's in the 5th grade one, and she's one of 2 English speakers, which I actually love. But the idea that we,
Yeah.
people drop out and the lot can't add. Now we got to add Chloe this year because she came in French speaking, but the program dwindles like pretty quickly.
Yeah.
We started with 5 or 6 more than we currently have, and
Sure.
so if it's not a hard and fast rule,
Yeah, it's not, and that's what we're trying to get more information from.
Can I say something about the licensing? Since, but first I want to say thank you for paying for my license, because when I came in, I didn't have a professional education license. I was teaching at the university and not in the elementary level. So the district gave me, I think it was $9,000 it took about 2 years to do that. So I started with the 5-year temporary license. John is 2. I don't know what the other teachers are doing, and then it took about 2 years to get this professional education license and the endorsement for bilingual education. So the only thing we would need to add if we switch to an immersion program would be then the French as a foreign language endorsement, which should take 6 months to a year max. Then we would be able to cover all the EL students and the English-speaking native students. We would have all 3 basically, the PEL with the 2 endorsement, the bilingual endorsement, and French as a foreign language endorsement. So it takes a while. So if we were going to switch to an immersion program, we would need to start getting these endorsements now so that we don't run out, of eligibility, being able to keep our jobs and have to teach as substitutes in our own classrooms, like it's happened, so that we could be ready to go when we would transition to an immersion program.
Yeah, all of that is true. We do provide funding through our state and federal grants around helping staff
in the French dual language program, because kindergarteners, especially with the pandemic, the number of kindergarteners the number of people who started kindergarten was dropping year over year. And Madame Florence is basically saying that, I don't know, if the writing's on the wall, I feel like we should have been having these conversations several years ago. And I realize Dr. Bouillon, you're saying it wasn't brought up as a potential option, but I also don't think that the challenge of the French dual language program and its low numbers was brought up to us as parents as a significant issue and a potential problem that in future years would cause you to consider changing how the program looks. So right now I really am interested in pursuing what Madame Florence has brought up, which is basically get the licensure now so that is an option. But I also don't understand why it wasn't considered 2 or 3 years ago when the numbers started becoming an issue.
Yeah, I don't think we have an answer to that first part of your question, other than it just wasn't being considered at that time. I think my assumption is that we were waiting to monitor the growth of the program or not, because for the 5 years, 10 years previous to that, numbers were steadily growing. And so enrollment shifts happen, immigration shifts happen, and so some things are unforeseen and some things could have been predicted, right? So I don't have a great answer for you other than they just weren't. Yep.
So,
I think she's had her hand up first.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I have 2 very naive questions. The first is, what are the room caps on, head caps on
Another good question.
K-2, 3-5, 6-8? And the second is, what are the recruitment efforts for EL specifically? I mean, people are coming in as asylees, it's as a person who's immigrated to the United States under a fairly stable visa, I can tell you that it's absolute chaos the first couple of years that you're here. It's harder for people who are coming in under asylee visas, and so what I'm asking is, how is this program promoted specifically, or how are people made aware of this other than by word of mouth, which is how I found out about it?
So we have in the past I was invited, and I don't think the Budibus are here, to her talk show before to talk about the program and to talk to families about what we do. That was pre-pandemic. It probably could be good to do that again. We are fortunate that we do have the president of the Congolese community as a staff member, so he and his constituents talk to the community very much about what we offer at the district. Every time a family enrolls, an immigrant family enrolls, a family that speaks another language enrolls, Lily or I or the secondary level coordinators are immediately notified. At that point, one of us has a conversation with the families to talk to them about their options. So we are telling family when they enroll what they can do. The larger challenge is getting families to the Urbana location, which has more to do with some of the political challenges, the visa challenges, things that are beyond the district's control, unfortunately.
So does the Y Immigrant Center help promote this program? Is that part of?
Yeah.
So, because there's like another.
Yep, the Refugee Center, the Study Center.
There's language initiatives at the university. Do they get that too? Are they given packets to assist in this kind of promotion?
I don't know that I have personally given anything to the Department of Linguistics, but that's a great idea.
There's some in the, and I just say this as a member, but there's some in the Department of Anthropology as well. Like they're kind of small and sort of scattered, but yeah. Okay, and then the CAPS.
Yes, so the CAPS, they what's the word I'm looking for? They go up as the kids get older.
Yeah.
And it's contractual language between the union and the Board of Education district. At kindergarten, the maximum is 25 in a classroom. At 26, you're required to what's called implement a remedy. And the remedies could be anywhere between additional teaching assistants, creating a separate classroom, 2 classrooms, etc. First grade, you probably know these numbers.
26.
It goes up a little bit. By 5th grade, it's 32.
For monolingual or dual language?
Monolingual. So good question though. In an English learner program, you are required to follow 90% of that rule.
So the remedies kick in at 90%.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 90% of 20,
18.
did I say 26? Kindergarten's 22.
Kindergarten's
23.
23.
Yeah, I said wrong. Kindergarten's 22, at the 23rd student, you have to implement a remedy. So that when you have 18 or more in an English learner serving classroom, that's when the remedies kick in.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're
Can I add something? So just to add in regards to how we identify families, to talk to them about our dual language programs, how we talk to families even about our ESL programs. When a new family registers into the district, they fill out the whole language survey. So 2 questions on that survey. Is a language other than English spoken in your home? Yes, which one? Does your child speak a language other than English? If yes, which one? So as long as a family says yes to either question, then that's what triggers us as coordinators, myself as early childhood and elementary, our middle school or high school coordinator, to then test the child's English proficiency, number 1. And number 2, that's when I'll be like here for example, when Miss Dorothy says, oh, we have a family, that has French in the home, so then I will reach out to the family if I need help, communicating with the family, Jean-Fleur, will help me with that. But that's how we start to identify what families have, what other language in the home. But if a family chooses to say no and no, then I don't know, to reach out and say, hey, do you know about our Spanish dual language program? Do you know about our French dual language program?
Can I ask a question of Papa John for a second? Just because.
Oh, yeah.
There's plenty, lots of people who are from the DRC, but given your position in the community, are there barriers, to your knowledge, are there barriers for new immigrants from the DRC coming here to responding yes if they have French in the home? Like, is there any sort of, not cultural reason, but like given the situation in the DRC, are there reasons why someone wouldn't, when they come here, identify as being French or Lingala speaking? Like, would there be any reason to not do that?
I don't think there is any reason. The only thing is we have parents that never been to school. And then if the parent never been to school, that means he will not speak other language other than Lingala. So there is no reason for him having a student that speak in French because he will not practice it at home. The only place he can speak it would be a school. That's one of the reasons.
I think many African families still see forms as boilerplate. Just get it done with, you know. So the proper consequences of your choices at that point may not, as she's explained, be known at that point. It's like, I'm just feeling this for the purpose of my child being enrolled, full stop, and they'll just get it over with and hand it in, you know. I mean, at this point, probably the only forms you filled in are at the embassy trying to get a visa or something, you know. So that's one reason why many families, especially that either semi-literate or not literate at all, may not be able to understand the consequences of these forms.
So I immigrated here from Canada on a student visa, which is the most highly monitored visa in the United States. The second most highly monitored after the student group is asylee visas, right? So I can tell you that every single form that I received was an extremely stressful event for me because it's a very security-minded immigration system, and I was always afraid of messing something up and actually missed forms and missed things as a result. And so it occurs to me, and I'm just putting this out there, and it's a discussion for other people to have, right? But it occurs to me that if it's a form-based system, this is the issue you just mentioned is an issue, but the second thing might be that there's like, it's extremely stressful to immigrate here. I can't emphasize strongly enough how fearful my first 10 years were here, and I'm a pretty privileged immigrant. And so that there might need to be something beyond forms if you're looking to actually bring kids in that need the education, right? That there might be some other way that needs to be thought about to get around those barriers.
So the home language survey is not a district initiative form. That is state guidance. That is what we have to do according to the state and following the process that Miss Lily outlined as far as who checks yes, who gets screened. All of that is set for us by the state of Illinois. So as far yeah,
But you could do
the federal guidance. Yes.
supports around it, right?
So what I was going to add to that, which is a large reason why positions like Sean Flores, like our Spanish liaisons, have been put in place so that way when families come and need assistance with forms or want someone to walk them through the forms, they are available to help with that.
And I also think there'll be time at the end, one of our slides is to talk about ways in which as as a community, that we can work together to address some of those concerns and issues. And I think there would be, I think, if we put our heads together on that.
Okay. Can I add something really quick of what we talked about on Monday when we met with superintendent and the three, once they get past all this paperwork and immigration things, the three factors that cause us to have less enrollments than Champaign does, for example, we have less low-income housing, we have less low-wage jobs available, because a lot of the immigrants come in with high diplomas that they can't use here, and they'll be working at Solo Cup and Kraft and Plastic Pack, which are all in Champaign, and they're closing down more and more factories here and opening more in Champaign. So then if they move to Champaign to be closer to work, they go to Stratton, which has the equivalent program instead of here. And then the other thing is the violence we've been experiencing in the school, the amount of disrespect that the kids are exposed to on a daily basis in a normal environment that's not DL has caused quite a few parents to pull out the kids out of the program and go to Holy Cross or St. Matthew's or the private school. We're not experiencing that amount of problems in the schools. So that then if they pull out a 6th grader or a 5th grader, the kindergartners and all the younger kids are going with them so that they have them all in the school. So we've lost a few in our program because of that.
Yeah, and when we switched to remote learning during the middle of the pandemic or the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of families go to the parochial schools, the Catholic schools, etc., because they were still in person, and for a variety of reasons, as you shared. And I don't know, Papa John, if you, is there also religious reasons that families are switching to private school, the Catholic schools, etc., as well?
Yes, as Madame Florence mentioned, other than that, there's the belief. Congolese, most of them are believers. There are some other decisions that have been made on public school that is against their faith.
Sure.
And they can't allow the student being in that kind of environment.
You had your hand up earlier. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, so I also think that it might be a stigma for English, French-speaking countries or parents, because sometimes when you speak in French, someone can make fun of you, like, okay, why don't you speak English? And I'm a teacher, I'm a bilingual teacher, French and English. I have been to classroom where I have been mocked by students. So you're speaking, they're clearly understanding what you're saying in English, but then pretend that they're not understanding what you're saying just to mock you, just to mock your assets. So I think that's also a problem, and some parents can just decide to just keep their children in, English-speaking schools to just avoid that. So.
And that actually goes along with, in a coming slide, we're going to talk about one of the questions earlier around the Spanish whole school model. Those are very similar reasons as to why trying to create school communities, culture and climate and mission and vision around fostering multilingualism, multiculturalism, right? Whether it's good or bad, the language of power in the United States is English, right? And then it creates these other misunderstandings and misappropriation of that, which is what is tricky around foreign language immersion. Sometimes the power of English can take over. And that's another potential drawback of looking at foreign language immersion. I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't do that. I'm just saying English can become very, very dominant. We see it in Spanish-English dual language. By the time in middle school, high school, by the time a lot of students reach middle school and high school, they're very hesitant to speak French or Spanish, even though they've been in the program because of issues that you're sharing and the social issues around that. But we have a few more slides. I know there's lots of questions. I will stay as long as we need to address questions.
Sorry.
But some of these might answer more questions.
I can appreciate more slides. I kind of want to push back on what you just said, because I don't think I agree with you, because it sounds like it's not the responsibility of the dominant group to learn the language or anything like that. But I think if you have an immersion program, you are giving an opportunity for more support to be grown among your community. Like,
for sure,
I agree, because I think, but the alternative being, we're gonna now go to a system where people who speak French at home are the only people who are receiving French language support.
Yeah.
I think that supports the English dominant, and the French is always.
I don't disagree with you. Well, my point is, there's a lot of emerging research in the field right now around the gentrification of dual language immersion programs.
Sure.
Where programs become prioritizing the needs and requests of English-speaking families, middle class, over the needs and requests of the minoritized group that's participating. I'm not saying that's what you're advocating, or that's what foreign language immersion is advocating for. My point was that becomes what happens is, in the guise of trying to be more intentional around fostering multilingualism, we run the risk of creating programs that serve a class of the community that's already privileged, right? So we have to be very careful when we have conversations around foreign language immersion because of that. It happens in two-way immersion. We see it in our programs. Oftentimes we run into situations where we're having conversations and making decisions around whose needs are we prioritizing, and oftentimes districts struggle with the way in which privileged families are advocating for their needs first and foremost over the needs of who the program was originally designed for. That was my point. But I agree with your response.
Yeah, I think that speaks to being intentional and careful in the way that you would approach a foreign language immersion program, but I don't think that's an argument against.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that's a layer that we would have to take into account, for sure.
Lily, would you do me a favor, make sure Mosika is okay with staying longer? We did arrange for childcare for an hour, so I just wanna make sure she's okay with staying. Thank you. Okay, so, these are the same information but for first grade. Just understanding that the first year we had 8 kids apply, we did have 3 on the wait list since then. At the first grade level, we have not had as many families apply at first grade that we have in the past. And I'm gonna kind of go through things a little quickly. So we had talked about these with the teachers already, but I wanted to kind of share this with you as well. So we are talking about for next year. What are some options that we have for next year? So what we are talking to you about today is maintaining this 2-way dual language program as we have committed to all of you, but based on enrollment, doing so with split level classrooms as needed. So that could be a K1, a 2-3, and a 4-5. These classrooms could be housed in any of the buildings where other classrooms are English monolingual, such as the same model that you have currently at Yankee Ridge, where French DL is in a building with English monolingual. Or something to consider is that would it be a good idea to have the French DL classrooms housed with the Spanish DL classrooms in one building, so in creating somewhat of a multilingual academy where all of the classrooms, all of the needs are focused on the 3 pillars of dual language. Due to enrollment for next year, this is the class structure as I mentioned. We have used splits in the district as long as before Dr. Wiemeld or I were ever here. This is something that is used as a tool by district administration to address when class sizes are smaller. This is for monolingual. This is not just because of French dual language. So which the location could be for the French DL program would be based on the decision and the work happening between the Board of Education and the redistricting consultants.
And we'll talk in just a moment, ways in which that you and us can be a part of that conversation and making requests, recommendations for where it would be housed next year, because redistricting is taking place. And we can talk about what that means if there's any questions.
So for next year, we are not currently planning for a foreign language immersion program for next year. As Dr. Wiemeld talked a lot about this, about the enrollment, about how that would be over the 50-50 cap that we are targeting as being a dual language program. This is something that we can definitely talk about as we continue to monitor the increase or decrease of our immigrant population, of our French Lingala speaking population, and as we look at district enrollment trends across the entire district. And as Dr. Wiemeld said, there will be opportunities for feedback to be shared with this and the board as we move forward.
And I also wanted to, because this is I don't know if Dr. Tatum is still on, I do see her, and I'll turn the volume up. This is, when we say district administration here, we're meaning this is a bigger decision and conversation than our levels, right? We're talking about superintendent and Board of Education. So Dr. Tatum, would you mind sharing anything? And if not, that's okay too. Yeah, just wanted to check.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. So yes, Lupe basically said what I was going to say in regard to this slide. At this time, with our other priorities around student achievement, just curriculum needs, professional development needs, right now the district administration is not considering creating a foreign language immersion model. And I think Joan and Lupe have done a great job talking about why and some of those. I won't belabor that. There will be opportunities, if you want to go to the next slide, Lupe, for upcoming feedback around redistricting and where the program would be housed, the current program. So we're committed based on the kindergarten enrollment projections that were on a previous slide. We know for 24-25, we're anticipating and hoping for 25-26 that the kindergartners who are currently joining the French dual language program, and we'll do everything that we can to work with those families to make sure that they understand the program and how much they can grow in that program. So definitely for the next 2 years, we are very committed to the combination model that was just described, the K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Splits are not new at Yankee Ridge, so if we have any families sitting there who have been Yankee Ridge families in the past, years ago when Yankee Ridge's enrollment started to decline just because of the neighborhood, there were some shifts in housing in the neighborhood, and there was a big decrease in student enrollment just for our neighborhood students. There were many split classrooms in the building, so that is a remedy that the district often uses, but it has been something that has been used at Yankee Ridge for many, many years. So I know splits are not the ideal mode of instructing students, but definitely something that we continue to support. We'll work with the staff. We'll try to put as many supports in place that we can through the Tier 1 co-teaching model that will be in place next year. We're pretty confident that we'll be able to do that for next year and definitely, hopefully the year after. So right now with redistricting, this conversation is very timely. We intentionally waited to have this conversation as we knew the board was considering the future for Spanish dual language and the whole language model. So it's already been discussed that the board did approve that on Tuesday, January 9th. Where that program will be housed is a continued conversation with our consultants from RSP Associates. So we'll talk about that a little bit on January 23rd. We are not going to be making a recommendation on January 23rd. I have received some questions about that. The recommendation will be forthcoming following more public input from the community. So on February 28th and 29th, overall redistricting public input and feedback will be received. That meeting will happen at Urbana High School, 5:30 to 7 p.m. Simultaneously, while we are engaging the public in person, we're also going to be opening an input survey that will be designed from the consultants. So we'll work with them to share it with families all over the district. Part of that communication and that feedback that we get will be very specifically about where the Spanish dual language program should be housed. That isn't the only consideration, but that is definitely something I think that is very relevant to this conversation. They will be sharing lots of information at that time around enrollment trends, around some of their boundary changes that they might be making. So all of this will kind of be happening simultaneously in the next couple weeks and months. We'll continue to work with the RSP Associates after those February dates. We'll take all the feedback from the public, and at that time, present to the board on April 2nd a boundary plan that will identify which school would be the Spanish dual language school. I think at that time, we would also have a conversation and talk about and make a recommendation for whether or not the French dual language program should be part of that Spanish dual language multilingual whole school model that Lupe shared on a previous slide. Our goal is by April 16th, the board would take action on the boundary plan, and then we would be able to, at that point, move forward very quickly with talking with families and sharing information with families about where they would be moving for the 24-25 school year.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about the plan? So it sounds like public input is happening before families have any idea of what the changes will be.
Changes regarding
The
what's-
district boundaries. So the
Right.
plan is being presented on the 2nd and voted on the 16th?
Yes.
So will there be follow-up, I guess, opportunities for families to provide feedback about what their changes would be. This is only 2 weeks.
Dr. Abraham, did you hear that question?
So I guess I'm not understanding the question. So on the 28th and 29th, the consultants will be sharing lots of different scenarios and talking a lot about their recommendations for where families and neighborhoods should move based on enrollment, based on their analysis of future enrollment in the district. I think they're looking out at least 5 years, probably beyond that. So the public input that we collect in February will be around a lot of different scenarios.
Okay, thank you.
And the consultants will collect all of the input, and then based on their work, their demographic work, their just looking at all the data that they have collected from the city, from the Regional Planning Commission, they will then make a recommendation to the board around what they feel the new redistricting boundaries should be.
Okay, yeah, so there will be drafts or possibilities presented, scenarios in February. Okay,
Yes,
thank
so
you.
there will be opportunities for input at those 2 meetings. That's why we're doing them in person in conjunction with the survey. There'll be different versions of the boundary plan and different scenarios that people can react to.
Thank you. Our last slide is just open time for Q&A and conversation, but I also want to just say one thing. If you feel like you need to leave, don't feel like it's disrespectful to move up and leave, but we will stay as long as anyone wants to stay and have a conversation. And if you do leave before that, we just appreciate you being here, and we look forward to that collaboration and conversations around next steps.
The only other thing I want to add before we start open Q&A, because I feel like this is something that I was asked a lot by some of the parents in our Spanish dual language program. So I just want to open the floor up to our staff, because I was frequently asked by parents, but what do the teachers want? They're the ones who are going to be here. So teachers, if you have anything specific to share about the options for next year, about options moving forward, you don't have to. I just wanted, because parents will ask me, well, what do the teachers want? So I think it's important for them to hear from you as well.
Two things. One thing we haven't really discussed is what do the parents or what do we want about joining or not joining the Spanish dual language program if we go to one building. One thing that's been brought up is if we do join the Spanish dual language program, we would have more of a multilingual academy feel like they do in Champaign, and that might help us recruit some students. We might have less behavior problems and all around in the building than we do. And so that might be helping us as a recruiting tool to have one big language academy if we were to join the Spanish dual language program. I don't know if the parents will be asked to vote or present feedback on that, or because that's not been part of the school board's conversation at all. It's all been about the Spanish dual language program being in one school. It hasn't even really been mentioned what's going to happen to the French dual language program.
So I think now that you've kind of heard about these would be the types of things that you could comment on in February when you...
Yeah. Then my other thing was, yeah, we did have one-room schoolhouses. That was 200 years ago. Now we're moving from 6 classrooms last year to 5 classrooms when Papa John had 3rd and 4th. Now we're down to 4 classrooms because we're combining 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Now next year we're going to be down to 3. We can see this happening. We've been seeing it happening. If we don't do anything about growing enrollment, we are going to die out. Like, this is not a question of are we going to have more enrollment? We are seeing it. It's happening. We got to do something about it, and we have to get whatever, endorsements we need, whatever we need to do to change the structure of the program, because if we are not proactive about it, it's going to be back down to what it was at King's School when I was hired in 2017, when I was trying to herd 20 students down the hallways of kindergarten and 1st grade together, having them in my classroom for 45 minutes a day, and the parents complaining they're not speaking enough French, they're not learning to read, write, in French. We basically were doing songs in French and trying to learn some vocabulary, but it was nowhere near the amount of proficiency the kids have now. So if we don't want to go backwards to what we had 5-6 years ago, we're going to have to be proactive and make some changes to move forward. That's my input as a teacher.
Dr. Did you have a say something real quick? Or we can wait.
Yes. No, I was actually going to chime in and respond to what Madam Florence was saying. Is on the slide, the option about the multilingual school, that is definitely something that is going to be in the consideration on the 28th and 29th. And I'm glad Lupe asked specifically what people's thoughts are around that. We feel, administration feels, that this would be a way to protect and maintain the two-way immersion program, and to maintain the integrity of the program. If it were to be moved into a multilingual school space. And I honestly do believe what Madam Florence said, we talked about that on Monday with the staff, is I do feel moving it would be attractive to some of our French Lingala families and hopefully attract some of them back to the districts. And so I think that is something that we are hoping would happen if that is the will of the feedback that we receive, that is something that people are interested in. I do think it would be a great way to recruit families back or to recruit new families, because we would be maintaining that two-way DL program.
Thought I saw another hand, no? Like in terms of teacher feedback?
Teachers?
No, that's okay.
Sorry, I keep talking, but if we are taking into consideration that we might grow back to what we were, 6 classrooms instead of 3, wouldn't it be wise to make sure that we have room in whatever building we're going to be put in? Because when we're counting the enrollment, if we're able to grow it back to where it was, we would need 6 classrooms instead of 3. So it would be nice if they took that into consideration when they count the amount of classrooms available to move the Spanish dual language program, if they're going to move us with them, you know.
I agree. I think that's important feedback for the upcoming.
Mine's on it.
Yours, yeah, for the upcoming feedback opportunities around that. And I think those are all important considerations to put out to the consultants and to our district office administrative team.
So my question is, with the plans for the 6th grade center, so even if we did create the multilingual or the Spanish dual language academy, then those 6th graders would go to the 6th grade center?
After, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no matter what school 5th graders are in, whether it's the current, the whole school model or another school in town, everybody would go to the 6th grade center.
And so there would still be dual language services there?
That's right, yep.
Okay.
Is this a point of clarification? So in terms of how English learner is defined, like the funding, does the language matter? Is that the reason why we're talking about putting these two things together? Like, or is it's French, Lingala, English learner? Like, is it separated, or is it just sufficient to say English learner, 1 head count, Spanish or French?
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking specifically to the question around 20 or more?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
English learners of the same language.
Oh.
Yes.
But French and Lingala to be combined?
So the challenge on our form, oftentimes you'll have families write 1, 2, 3, multiple languages. John, for example, would write 6 different languages on his child's form. Our data mining system in the district only allows you to enter in 1. So we do have ISB only allows you to enter in 1. So we do have families that are French/Lingala, but they may only appear as French. But for ISB purposes, they look at EL and they look at the language.
Okay.
But we have historically always considered the French and Lingala together. Although it doesn't count for the state to determine whether or not that's 20, we combine them for programming.
So
Typically.
we're assuming, I guess part of this depends on where the school location is going to be, right? Which is so far undecided.
Sure.
But we're assuming that combining all dual language programs into a multilingual academy will boost registrations from families from the DRC and other French-speaking families.
Yeah.
I think that was a comment that someone had made.
Yeah, I feel like I'd like to know more about why that would be the assumption. Like, I'm not saying that it's not true, I'm just saying that, like, I don't know, it's hard with my background, it's hard for me to figure that out. I don't have the information that y'all have.
Can I respond to that?
Sure, yeah.
So the first thing is behavior. You see, Congolese, the education that they give to their children is very tough. So going to the place where they are allowed to do whatever they want to do, it's in contradiction with what they learn at home. So having the same culture, mostly with Spanish, it's related to the culture, it will motivate them to send students to that school. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, environment. So it seems like when the students go to the public school, they are not under control, if I can say that. That's what the Congolese think. They send students to Catholic schools because they think that the education is very tough and students are not allowed to do whatever they want to do. And having them going to the Spanish school, it will be like the culture will be connected.
I get it, okay.
Yeah, and I think from the personnel perspective, so your question was more about families, but I think it kind of relates that I don't know very many dual language or bilingual educators who wouldn't want to be a part of a school community where everyone is committed to the same mission of multilingualism, right? That's one of the drawbacks of what's considered strand models, like currently at Yankee Ridge, currently at Lille, is some classrooms are monolingual, some are dual language, and there can be conflicting priorities sometimes that happen, not intentionally necessarily, but when a whole school, like I did my dissertation in a whole school dual language model, the entire community and culture was 100% in on the same mission. And that just builds this morale around that we're all on the same page when it comes to that. And so I would think similar type of idea for families. Every family in this school is choosing to come and it's all committed, buying into multilingualism. So I would think it would be a similar type of idea, but you're right, the assumption that more families would come is a question
Right.
that we would need more information.
The only thing, it sounds like a utopia by the way that you're describing it, and I love that, but, and this is maybe me being a little bit selfish, my only, and it's kind of a minor concern, is that by migrating the dual language programs into a singular building, you leave a population of students behind that don't have to think about it at all. Right? They don't have to think about any of the cultural things around it. They don't have to think about any of the language diversity. I come from a country that has been like in over 100 years of fighting over separating over language diversity. And so I might be a tiny bit sensitive about it, but it's, but yeah, it seems like then you leave this sort of bastion of one language. And that seems like a shame.
And I think that's a fair concern. I think seeing how many students in our district that are emergent bilingual, we serve over 45 plus languages on an average every year. So there are ELs and immigrant families in every building in this district. It is a charge of building administration to make sure that those cultures are incorporated into their buildings, regardless if it's the dual language building or not. So I appreciate that feedback and that concern, and I think it does tell administration that we need to make sure that all of our buildings are creating welcoming spaces for our immigrant and our language communities.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Papa Fleur, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question from Paul. He's asking about what you're mentioning, that the program is going to be like French or Lingala. Why are you mentioning Lingala? Is Lingala going to be part of the program, or is just a way to identify students that are from Congo?
We were talking about how students were identified. We do not formally teach Lingala in the classroom. That being said, as a former teacher who had Spanish and Cacobal speakers in the classroom, it did benefit me to try to incorporate those two languages together when I could, but it's not being formally taught.
Oh, okay. Because actually, the most spoken language in the Congo is now Lingala, is Swahili. Mm-hmm. And the most spoken language in Africa is Swahili. Mm-hmm. So we have a chance to have most student coming from Kinshasa side, where they speak mostly Lingala. Then it makes us think that Lingala is the most spoken language, but it's not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And I think for clarification, again, on that home language survey, if I was to put that I, as the parent, spoke French and Lingala, but my child only spoke Lingala, that doesn't take the child out of having that chance to participate in French dual language. So I think that's the part of that we, kind of take it simultaneously. So if a family does have French in the home, and the child is identified as an emergent bilingual, then they are eligible for that automatic enrollment in French DL.
And enrollment in any program, whether you're regardless of the language you speak, is an option. No one is required to enroll in dual language or even an ESL program. Families have the right to waive those services at any time too.
I'm trying to go this way. Yes.
Okay, so I want to talk about the splits. So my daughter is in kindergarten right now. There are 11 kids in her class. So next year, if I understand it correctly, she will be in class kindergarten and first grade. And if there are 9 Congolese or French-speaking kids in early childhood that we're considering, would they also open up 9 English spots for kindergarten
So
next year?
every year kindergarten enrollment, what we see as a projection can be very different than what we actually see at enrollment.
Right.
How many classes and what the class makeup is really doesn't get solidified until after kindergarten connection. So if by some, it just happened that we had 20 French Lingala speakers next year, I'm just making up a number, then we would probably have to talk about, do we still want to have a K1 split or do we keep kindergarten by itself? It really is going to be up to review every single year as enrollment trends happen.
So let's be optimistic here. I think it's been very difficult to staff the French program with qualified teachers, and under this current plan, we're going to get rid of 2 teachers, right? So Ms. Gibbs has already been told that she will.
Ms. Gibbs still has her ESL position for next year. She has been told.
Oh, great. But not necessarily.
The literacy intervention shift is happening for the entire district.
Okay. And then another teacher who will have
So our teachers have certified, the TVE is pre-K through 12. So the TVE can function at any level. I can tell you that we have vacancies for ESL, we have vacancies for Spanish dual language. Some of our teachers could teach in Spanish dual language. Some of our teachers could teach at the middle school and high school. So I don't want to say that there is not a place in the district for staff, because there is. So I don't
But
want
we
to say
would
that.
let go one Yankee Bridge teacher. Like, in fairness to them, they would need to know.
Absolutely, those conversations would be forthcoming once we have more solidified answers about redistricting, about where it's housed, about what the enrollment is.
We will over time be needing to add in instructional classes of French language arts at the middle school and high school. So it wouldn't necessarily be placed out of the French program. Right now we have a section of French language arts in the middle school for the 6th grade group, and there's some 7th graders in with it too. But they, we're committed to offering that. So there's options.
And I don't want to take out early childhood either. We have, as you can see, we have a number of French-speaking students that could use supported early childhood too.
So, first off, I'd like to say thanks for conducting this in a sort of an open communication platform. I think that's one of the biggest issues that us as parents have had. It seems like communication is very reactive and not sort of proactive. Like, a lot of this information could have been given us a long time ago. Hopefully, things change. And I've seen it with other, like the Spanish dual language programs too, like the frustration from the parents. It just sort of seems like stuff comes at us. My question for you, or at least some information that I'd like to have as a parent, is could you place our numbers in a broader context of Champaign County, of what are the other EL students, and what are they seeing with growth, movement? Because I think that would help us at least provide input.
Sure.
I appreciate that. I did reach out to my counterpart in Champaign before winter break, and I think my email got lost in the shuffle, but I will follow up.
Yeah. I can't speak with certainty about Champaign's enrollment. Generally speaking, across the state, we're seeing large increases of recent arrival immigrant youth from Central America, statewide, Chicago, and then funneling down. Generally speaking, downstate, it's really Urbana, Champaign, Bloomington. There's very few districts that have sufficient, or not sufficient, but a significant number of English learners. We are seeing our what we would call lower incidence languages, so the languages that are representative of maybe 5 or 6 kids scattered throughout the district who speak Yoruba, yeah. That has maintained for as long as I've been in the district, for 20 years. We always have hovered, well, in the last 10 years, we've hovered around 40 to 45 different language groups of English learners. What we have seen a decrease in is international students directly affiliated with the university, mostly due to the Orchard Downs family housing, which is in Urbana, is becoming less desirable for families to live in. And so they're living in other areas in the Champaign-Urbana. Our percentage of growth mirrors Champaign's percentage of growth of English learners. We have a larger percent to whole of English learners to non-English learners or native English speakers in Urbana than Champaign does. So Champaign's about 3 times our size school district, but we have, what's our percentage like?
About a quarter of our district.
25 to 30% are English learners, and in Champaign it's about 15% are English learners. The number is obviously, right, the percent to whole. So, but outside of Champaign-Urbana, there's very, very few English learners in St. Joe and Mahomet. And typically they email us frantically asking us
to provide services for them.
We have students that are bused from Mahomet or St. Joe to our schools for services that we take in. So I can't speak specific numbers, but we could.
Yeah, but I am equally as interested in the enrollment shifts as Stratton specifically over the past 5 years, so I will follow up on that. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard anecdotally from friends in Champaign that their French-speaking population has outgrown their spaces. And then we don't have enough, so it seems like there's outreach to do there. I also feel like just looking at the numbers of English speakers, we have room to add 1 or 2 or 3 English speakers at the beginning to even still fit in that 50-50.
Sure, yeah.
So I think there's outreach to do within the English speaking community so that they even know it exists.
Yeah.
Without having to just like, oh, it's on the webpage or whatever.
We saw that a lot when we started Spanish dual language between Leal and Dr. Williams. A lot of the Dr. Williams neighborhood families either didn't really understand what it was, or so really doing more outreach of one-on-one conversation. This is what your child will do. This is what it will look like. So I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even remember how we learned about it. We have a 3rd grader in the program, but even letting families know this could be for you, even if you don't speak another language. So that could get us to some larger numbers.
I have an issue with the process. I don't know the social economic of the English speaking students in. I don't know, I'm assuming we're mostly upper middle class, white, based on the area. And I know like when I registered my oldest, which I found out by accident because he started by an early childhood and got put in with the Francophone speaking with Heather Schwartz.
Okay.
And she told me about it, that'd be really good for him. But I had to like pre-register in kindergarten. You have to pre-register before you can apply. And I think that hurts more of the English speaking, the lower socioeconomic, because it's like, I think straight they tend to register late. And we are a university community, so you get a lot of people moving in over the summer, that it's too late for them to apply. So it's wondering if, we could leave.
No, I think that's great feedback, especially for Lily, who's at early childhood, to kind of think about some ways that we can better inform all of our early childhood families, not necessarily just the classroom where most of our French Lingala students are. So, thank you.
Gentleman in the back.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, what does the state law say about obtaining external funding, and has any effort been made to find such grant money to maintain the program or grow the program?
So I will tell you that, I don't want to say every year, but many of the years that we have had a program in place, I have applied for funding through the French Embassy. They have been able to give us some, which has helped with materials, which has helped with professional development. But when you're talking about funding an entire program, that would be the staff and salary of all of those people, in addition to transportation, materials. So we would be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the French Embassy has not been that generous. So
there used to be, it comes and goes, and it's all grants and everything, and how that goes. And who's in office and all of that stuff. But there are times where there's broader grants targeting very specific needs of districts. So it could be a teacher recruitment or teacher licensure grant that we could apply for. Those are all things that we are actively looking for regularly. But I would also say if there are other ideas for funding sources,
Absolutely.
we
Send
can
them my
work
way.
together.
Yeah, one of the challenges with grant-based funding, with running something solely on grant-based funding, is that most grants are finite. They're not necessarily, here, have this for the next 10 years, so that is a challenge thing, that we're only gonna use grant-based funding, and then in 2 years, we no longer have that, so.
Like hiring personnel on grants can be tricky. I know some people are probably very familiar with grants, so. But.
I have some money questions. So do we have a change in funding from what we do right now to what we're doing next year?
No.
For next year?
For English learning, bilingual.
For the FDL program?
No.
Okay.
So why are we
So,
doing it?
yeah, so how we afforded it right now, right? And now next year, we're combining.
Oh, you're changing in the allotment. You're asking about the allotment for next year?
Just a general funding, I guess, like, help me understand all of it. Like, if there wasn't a French program, we would need to still educate all of the children in it.
Right.
Right? And most classrooms in the school have, I don't know, 18, 20, 22. So I understand, you know, that classes of 10 might not always pay for themselves with the amount of students per teacher, that kind of thing. But if this year to next year, funding is the same.
Yeah, it's more of an enrollment. And I don't know if Dr. Tatum's still on, I think she's still on.
Yeah.
We are not advocating for splits because they're good or that's what we prefer, but a general practice is districts try to have similar types of class sizes across the district. And even in a monolingual school, there are splits that are created, even though the funding hasn't changed, splits are created due to low numbers. And it's not so much a funding question around that, it's more about balancing out class sizes across the school and across the district. Not saying that.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Go ahead, Dr. Tatum.
No, I was gonna say exactly what Dr. Wemel was saying, and I think that was Janelle asking that question.
Yeah.
You know, it is really hard when you have classrooms that have 20, 22 students, and then we have classrooms sitting with 9 students in them. You know, I think there's a fiscal responsibility lens to that, as well as just some equity across what our staff are having in terms of enrollment sitting in front of them. And I think next year, because of our student academic achievement focus, we really need to make some hard decisions about where we're putting our resources and our funding. We're getting ready to adopt a very costly ELA, SLA curriculum that will be coming out of our ESSER grant and be hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million plus, to buy this curriculum for the district K-8. So I do think we have to make some hard decisions, and unfortunately some of those do have to be around finances, right? So enrollment is the number one issue, what Dr. Wemel said, but it is very hard when we have teachers and principals in classrooms where we have people working with 20 plus, 25 students, and then we have classrooms with 8 or 9.
And I think that what I've seen in my experience as an administrator, like a school principal administrator, is there are oftentimes very difficult conversations that come amongst staff around fairness and class sizes, and so that's part of the question or comment that she's responding. But also, one thing I just realized that maybe wasn't very clear, so I just want to emphasize around funding for English learner programs. Yes. So let me clarify something. Although we do receive funding from the state and federal government, it's supplementary funds. So the district still has to pay, I don't know the percentage, you maybe know off the top of your head. So even if we didn't do dual language, if we were still doing just transitional bilingual everywhere, the district still picks up like 60 to 70% of the cost. Those state and federal monies, maybe 20 to 30%. So, I bring
I
that up.
think that's what I'm getting at, because it's, I
Okay.
feel like it's been presented at
Yeah.
times, like, we're gonna lose funding if we dip below these numbers for ELL.
Which we would, but it's not 100% of the funding that we expend.
But that money lost would be money that, should nothing change, the district would then have to pick up somewhere in their pot. And that's what Dr. Tatum is saying, that with all of the other initiatives and financial needs across the entire district, that is what she was saying, that she's not in a place to do that.
I think, I have a concern about combining K, like already saying we're going to combine K and first. We have 11 students in kindergarten, which then that means we can only have 10 coming into
So
kindergarten.
the contractual max for first grade is 26.
It's 20, so that would include both first
ELL.
and kindergarten.
Well, so with the remedies that he had mentioned, we tried to keep it at 90% of the average of 26. Sorry, not the average, it's 20% of 26, before we give a remedy. So that means that if they went above that, we would make sure that there was a full-time TA.
So we could have up to 15 kindergartners in the next year, and it would be a 26.
And they would get an aid.
Would it be 90%?
They would get an aid.
So like
I mean,
right
I
now,
guess what I'm saying is I don't wanna set us up to continue to shrink.
no, and like I had said earlier, once we have definitive numbers of who has enrolled, we'll have a better idea of, do we move forward with the K1, or do we consider keeping K by itself?
So you're saying you won't shrink, you won't deny somebody because we're trying to do a split class?
We cannot deny emergent bilingual students.
But you could deny it.
We could possibly have, the seats are determined by the number of emergent bilingual students we have, yes.
But that's also dependent on the feedback you get from the state, cause like, I mean,
True.
7 EL, 10 English
Yeah.
native speakers, to me, is a 50-50 split. I mean, statistically speaking, you
Sure.
can easily make
Sure.
an argument.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
there is
still
probably a
some
lot more
clarity
play
missing.
than we've done, okay.
Absolutely, yep. Okay.
Okay, I have another question not related to that. How many of the teachers right now in the Spanish program have, or maybe not even how many, but like what proportion have this immersion certificate? So if eventually we move to this multilingual academy that maybe would become more of an immersion type program, do we have the staff that then would allow us, I guess, to keep the French program because we have Spanish teachers with the immersion certificate? I don't know if that's clear,
Yeah,
but.
we have so I think there's two-part question. One part is how many have the full licensure and not on the transitional
Yes.
Within Spanish? Do you know that at the elementary level?
I can find it, I just emailed it to somebody shortly.
Okay, I was gonna say an estimate's fine, I think for now, but more have it than don't, but it's still a large number that don't.
Okay.
And then maybe the other part of your question was around how many of them have the foreign language endorsement?
I
Very
think
few.
so. I mean, yeah, I was just trying to figure out if that would be an avenue to kind of continue to have this program. And it would look different than it does now, but we don't have to turn students away that.
Yeah, I got you.
So currently our Spanish DL, we have 20, you're talking about Spanish DL? I just wanna make sure
Well, I'm
I'm
asking because
understanding.
it was presented to us as we can't move to an immersion program
Until they have that.
until they have that licensure.
Oh.
And I know that maybe isn't the overall goal, but it might have to be at some point if
Got
we
it.
wanna keep it going.
Yeah.
Got it. So we have 21 at Spanish DL classrooms. 4 of them are currently being taught by long-term subs. Of the rest, which 21 minus 4 is 8.
17.
Only 6 of them have the provisional license. The rest of them are all fully certified to do.
Okay. I mean, this is more of thinking about if the French community wants to move to a multilingual school,
Yeah.
how would that, beyond the cultural questions that we discussed, like how would that benefit the teachers that are there and the students? Like, will they have teachers that can support them if we have teacher absences?
Yeah,
That's
and what I will add to that I made an observation with the teachers when we met last Monday. This year, the way we restructured teacher meetings on Monday in collaboration, the French DL teachers and the Spanish DL teachers actually meet together once a month. My observation as a fly on the wall in this space for collab is that it has been very beneficial for them to have conversations around curriculum with an entire group of people that are all coming at it from the same perspectives. But again, I will defer to them to add anything else, but that has been my observation, that it's been really good for them to be together.
Okay.
We got a lot of help from the Spanish. They used to be coaches. They're doing away with them next year, but the coaches who helped design the program, we got a lot of help from them in the beginning, from the Spanish coaches, because they had designed and started their own program, and they helped us design and start ours in 2018 when we first started.
And this summer we did week one dual language tea. I know Miss Mary was able to go, and they were together as a program, and my hope is to do that every summer, is to take a core group of teachers from both programs to continue to get that knowledge base together.
So I have a question for our French staff. Do you think that if the program moved away from a monolingual school and moved into the dual language, that the French families would still get the support that they're getting? Like, I just think about like Papa Floor's job, Davina's job, like the people in our school that are in place for like attendance and the parent liaison speaking French. Like if we were to move into the dual language school, I don't know, would you need to have two parent liaisons? Would you need to have?
I think it's definitely something to consider. I would personally advocate for making sure that our families are supported still with the same support staff in those languages, but those are bigger conversations that we need to have with HR, but, yeah.
Okay. I think I would just be reluctant to say, yeah, let's do it without those conversations.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think I would add that even now, if I have francophone families at King, Thomas Paine, I still reach out to Papa Floor and say, hey, I need your help in communicating with families, or a family wants an interpreter. So I think as a district, we could still share our staff.
And that's something we've always done with our liaisons. They're housed at specific sites, but if they're needed at any of our buildings that don't have that support, they kind of know that we rely on them to kind of help here and there as well. Which we've had to do with Flora a lot more than with Spanish, because there's more staff across the district that speak Spanish. So.
I had a quick question to know, how many families did we leave behind at King? When we moved here in 2018, how many families, how many kids left, stayed over there? Because their little brothers and sisters keep going there.
Florence, I don't remember.
Okay.
And I will say, and not specific to Florence's question,
with you if you're leaving.
but we still do have families that choose King.
Yeah.
Or if they don't want ESL, they will choose their neighborhood school. So even though I will talk to them and say, we have French dual language, I encourage you to go to French dual language, to the point of they kind of start to get angry with me because I keep pushing, it's still their right to choose the program that they want. So even to this day, I still have families who have preschoolers next year that say, well, we're not going into French DL, we'll be going to King because my kids 10 years ago went to King and they want to continue.
I wonder if they realize what they're missing. Like if the kids could spend, or the parents could spend a day in a classroom with us, would that change their mind? Like what can we do for recruiting efforts in that direction to have them spend a day with us? Like I had a kid in first grade this year who was placed in a different school classroom because she came from Wiley. And the mom said, well, can I have her spend just one day in your classroom to see how it's going before we make that decision? I said, sure. She came on a Friday, and that Friday night she said, yeah, I want to move my kid to the dual language class so that she can be with you guys. She made her own decision, and then we just added a desk permanently for her in the classroom. Like if that would be an option for the parents to come visit, then we would have to set that up before the school year is over in May, to reach out to those parents and have them come visit our classroom, spend a day with us while the school year is going, so they can make the decision for next year.
So I think that's a great thing for us to do again. Pre-pandemic, we used to do open houses at time for Kindergarten Connection, so families could see all the buildings and kind of have that opportunity. Florence, since the pandemic, we haven't done that again. But I think we might be at a place now that we can start doing that again, opening our buildings for tours. So that's a good suggestion. I'll bring that up if we can start doing tours again.
But that may be slightly different, because I've been at the previous open houses, which was an after-school thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so this would be inviting parents.
When we first started Spanish dual language, we did it during the day.
I guess I don't understand. Yankee Ridge, the open houses we had was like
No, we had designated days and we had
So they're
shifts
invited into the classroom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
I made a QR code for this.
Oh, sorry. I speak French, but I mean.
Sure, absolutely.
because I take long time, we don't speak, more people speak, but I want to also talk for this program. J'aimerais bien que Papa Flo puisse m'aider et parler par rapport à ces programmes de français. Ce programme est très important pour nous, c'est pour cela que nous sommes là.
He says this program is very important, that's why we're here.
Si ce n'était pas important, on ne pouvait pas venir.
If it wasn't, we wouldn't have come.
Primo, c'est par rapport à la communication de nous, les parents, avec les enfants.
First of all, it's about the communication for parents to the children.
Nous sommes des immigrés ici aux États-Unis.
We are immigrants here in America.
Nous sommes venus dans un pays où on parle de français et lingala. Français et lingala.
Oh, we came from a country where they speak only French and Lingala.
Ça pouvait aussi être la même chose que vous, si vous devez aussi aller dans notre pays, là où on parle français et lingala, ça pouvait être aussi difficile, comme nous aussi nous sommes aux États-Unis.
It would be also difficult for you if you were going to choose to go to another country where they speak another language other than English.
Et c'est pas aussi facile à cet âge de prendre aussi une nouvelle langue.
It's not also easy for us at this age to learn another language.
Mais on se bat petit à petit.
But we are fighting, we try to learn.
Et nos enfants, ils ont moins 70%, 80% ici à l'école par rapport à la maison.
And our children have like 80% of time here at school than at home.
La plupart des parents, ils n'ont pas le temps même de voir leurs enfants dans les journées parce qu'ils passent aussi le temps au travail.
Most parents don't have time with their children because most of them are at work than at home.
Vous savez bien, s'il n'y a pas la communication à la maison, les parents avec les enfants, il y a un danger.
If we don't have communication with our children at home, there's a danger.
Primo, c'est par rapport à l'éducation
First of all, it's about education
et le comportement.
and behavior.
Si les enfants ratent ces deux choses,
If our children miss these two things,
et demain, il y aura des scandales.
tomorrow it's going to be worse.
Je crois que c'est parmi les luttes que le gouvernement des États-Unis lutte pour que nos enfants ne soient pas des bandits.
And I think this is the thing that the government is fighting so that our children may not be on the unsafe side.
Et nous étions dans la joie
And we were happy
lorsque on avait mis ces programmes de français ici à Yankee.
when they established this program of French dual program here at Yankee.
Pour le moment, j'ai 4 enfants.
Right now I have 4 children.
2 de mes enfants étudient ici à Yankee.
2 of them goes to Yankee Ridge.
Un garçon et une fille.
A boy and a girl.
L'année prochaine, ma fille aussi viendra encore ici.
Next year I'll have one more coming to kindergarten.
Parce qu'il y a plusieurs écoles ici à URBANA.
We have a lot of schools here in URBANA.
Mais si on a choisi Yankee Ridge, parce qu'il y a le programme de français.
If we chose Yankee Ridge, it's because we have a French dual program here.
Depuis ce programme est ici, je crois qu'à la maison, on a quand même ce temps-là de passer un peu de temps de communication avec nos enfants.
Since this program has been established here, we have like an improvement with our children at home speaking French.
Parce que la plupart de nos familles, de communautés congolaises et africaines,
most of our families from the community,
ils ont aussi des difficultés de communiquer avec ces enfants parce que leurs enfants ne parlent pas français, ils parlent plus l'anglais.
Most of our parents sometimes they have hard time to communicate with their children because they don't speak English, but
They
their
don't speak
children
French.
English.
Parce que nous, les parents, on a aussi des difficultés d'expliquer clairement cet anglais et ces langues françaises. Parce qu'on a toujours, quelque part, lorsque nous voulons aller vraiment, on est toujours bloqué.
And us, we also have sometimes hard time to communicate because we do not have the ability to speak English.
Je serai bref pour le dire que par rapport à ce qu'on vient de dire en Célier, ma présence était que on nous a communiqué qu'on a voulu enlever ces programmes de français ici à Yankee. C'est pour cela que non, nous sommes venus pour vous demander, vous êtes des districts, dit aussi à vos supérieurs qu'il y a un peuple là, aime que ces programmes puissent être là dans l'école par rapport à leur famille, par rapport à l'éducation des enfants et pour aussi nous aider des enfants lorsqu'ils prennent des cours ici à l'école, à la maison, que nous aussi nous puissions les aider à continuer à apprendre ce qu'ils ont eu à l'école, comme des devoirs, des exercices à la maison.
And what he wants to share is that he's first of all so happy that you invited us here so that we can discuss about this program. And he would like this program to continue so that he's gonna have more chance of his children to learn more of French. And if you can talk to your supervisors that this program may not be dissolved, it has to continue so that we have more chances to have our children learn the language and help us to communicate with our children.
Merci.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your comments, and I appreciate you sharing about your family. Do you need him to translate? And I wanted to add that all the reasons that you gave about how this is beneficial to you and your family is all the reasons why we advocate for this program to continue and to exist, to benefit. As a child of first-generation immigrants, I understand completely what you're talking about, what you're seeing at home. So I appreciate your feedback and your suggestions for us moving forward.
So I want to know for the next school year, when are we going to know the final changes about the French program here? So when are we going to know if our students, our children will keep coming here at Monkey Ridge, or they'll be moving to another school, I mean the multilingual academy? When will be that date?
So it sounds like, Joe, if you can go back a couple of
I
slides.
just need to remember which
Oh,
computer switch.
yeah, it was yours, sorry.
That's okay. This
It
one, I think.
sounds like, families will have the opportunity to give feedback. And then here is when the consultants will make a recommendation and have, that listed out. It will not be voted on until the 16th.
Okay.
So after the 16th, we should have final answers about where and who and what. Yeah.
Do you know, will they just give the board a plan, or is it like based on feedback, you know, this could be an option or this could be an option?
Dr. Aubrey Tatum, did you hear that question?
Yeah, we're paying them a lot of money to give us a plan.
Okay.
So they're going to take all the feedback, they're going to take all of the data that they've been collecting, and all of the information that they have at their disposal to present a boundary plan, which they are going to recommend to the, not options.
Okay.
They're going to say, here's our recommendation, Board of Education, and then they need to decide.
Okay.
Yes.
What is the best way to communicate with the board and I guess the consultants, because they would need the public input as well as the board disseminating that information, or yes?
So that input, those input meetings, and then they're releasing a survey at the same time.
Okay.
So those would be the two best.
Okay.
You can also always.
Yes, but I'm wondering if the consultants are getting information via what the board decides they learn, or are they going to get verbatim what the families say?
Yeah. I think for me personally, I think making sure that your feedback is heard directly by the consultants would be these meetings and the survey that they release.
So
And then
we're going
watch
to
all of our board meetings. So they've been watching our board meetings for the last couple of months. So
Right,
they've been hearing, many of the comments and, hearing public comments.
I got a question just about, I guess for everybody in here. I know that the Spanish program has like a bilingual parent advisory committee. Is there one for the French program?
So
This is it? Like, is it an official thing? Is this the first meeting?
So, no, we have had meetings via Zoom in the past. I will tell you that they have been very low attendance, as the Spanish ones are as well. Working with Flora the past few years, it's often been Flora and I, the teachers. But I am hopeful that we can, that our families will, come more in attendance.
They're designed and by law required, but for the families of English learners is the requirement. So a lot of the communication around those meetings is targeted for those families.
Yeah, and they're typically held in the language of our English learners.
But yeah, it's the French is Saturdays once a month.
Yeah, it has been Saturdays once a quarter.
Once a quarter. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's another avenue that could be capitalized on for gathering more feedback and organization for this process.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
always
that's kind of wasn't. Yeah.
It has been, 'cause that was Floor's recommendation, yeah.
I just wanna be totally clear. The decision on whether or not kindergarten, first grade will be combined next year, is that 100% been made?
No.
Or is it based, it's a projection?
It's a
It's
projection.
a projection at this point. We don't know that for any kindergarten class in the district. We can say that early childhood has enough for 20 kindergarten classes next year, and I'm just making up a number, but a quarter of them could decide to go private. We have a lot less kindergarten classrooms, we don't know.
And I will share, as someone who works, with families as students entering kindergarten, we try to get as best numbers when we have kindergarten registration, typically that first week of April. But again, numbers could change
Even
once
from April to
centralized
August.
registration
Yeah.
comes, or even those first couple weeks of school. Which is, I think, why for our emergent bilingual numbers, we do try to keep more spots open for them for those newer arrivals.
I'm gonna speak just as a parent in Urbana, from my perspective, and I am not a parent of an emergent bilingual child, so. I know the program is not necessarily designed for us, but we have chosen to put our kids in it because we have loved it for our second grade, he's doing amazing. Madame Flores is an incredible teacher, we've been like so thankful for the program itself, for just the love and care that we have received. And we also really love it that the classes stick together, and so it gives us the opportunity for our kids to be friends with different kids. That being said, if you move our program to a different school, if we lose teachers that we really love, and the program, continues to dwindle and is not supported in the way that, it should be, we're not gonna stick around. And we're like super involved, like I've clocked 100 volunteer hours last semester here. Like, just from my perspective, if they keep changing things, if we keep getting moved, if we keep condensing, I'm not gonna have my child in a class, that's not stable. And she already is, has a little bit of a problem with my kindergartner, like, I don't want her in an environment where there's 25 kids in the class, and kindergartners are just getting used to school. Like, that's such a hard thing for that teacher for the K1. I feel like it's not nothing that we would say, Madame Coivy, you're not gonna have a job next year, or Madame Florence, you're gonna be moved next year. Like, if the teachers wanna move to another school, we'll support that, we'll do what they wanna do. But I just wanna say that it's not nothing, moving things around, taking away a position, combining classrooms. That matters to the parents, and I think a lot of us, I guess I just wanna say, like, I think it's a really bad decision to combine kindergarten and first grade. We want the program to continue, so we will support whatever needs to happen. But I do think it's worth thinking about for kids trying to learn 2 languages. Can the district afford to have one more classroom where we give, kindergartners the opportunity to get used to being in school, to be in a smaller environment? The program's working. I mean, we have better test scores than the rest of the school, and the small classrooms is probably a huge part of that. And so, I understand we need the district to work for everybody, and there's financial concerns, but one classroom just does not seem, I think you're gonna lose people. You're gonna probably lose us. Like, we're like very invested people, combining, making the classrooms bigger. Like, it's already really hard for kids to learn 2 languages. We wanna support that, but I would feel frustrated with myself if I didn't get that out there, that like, it matters to us that you're combining kindergarten and first grade. The other grades I don't care about, I'm fine with that. But that one really, I think, matters. Like,
You mentioned
As
that.
another
That's what you
parent, though,
mentioned
what are
last
the sizes of the other kindergarten classes?
I can tell you the 2 dual classes are at 24 23 and 23.
And
We're
so
the
I
first
mean that, like, I feel very, like, we're very lucky. I
We
don't
are.
think that we could be I don't think it's fair of us to be advocating to say like, hey, no, we just want our kids to have smaller class size. Like that.
I agree
That's
with
where I
that.
struggle with that.
I
like-
do, but I think the stability of the program is.
Well, I think that the
Yes,
stability is
kindergarten
gonna be, like, there's literally been 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. I mean, you could, I'm gonna guess that the next year it's gonna be 6, and then the next year after that it's gonna be 6. Based on the last 6 years, we have a pretty straight linear regression line that says it's gonna be 6. There's gonna be 6 EL students, I mean, based off of past history. I think you're at the minimum right now. We have these 3 classes. I mean, that's kind of what we're at. And that, it's telling me to shut up, I guess.
Tony, it's time for lunch, I think.
I would say the same. This year is my first year doing first and second. I'd only had second before, and it was very hard in the beginning of the school year because first graders come in writing a line at most. Second graders come in wanting to learn to write paragraphs. But I cannot even imagine combining kindergarten and first, where the whole first semester will be spent on, reiterating expectations and how to write letters, while the first graders are ready to learn to write full sentences. That's going to definitely push back the first graders. There's no other way around it. Even if we have 2 TAs in the classroom, what you do with the whole group is going to make them regress. And if we could keep kindergarten and first grade separated as long as we can afford it, we definitely should.
And I think you make a valid point, Florence. My comment back to that is that in the Spanish dual language program, a lot of the students that are being added are students who have interrupted formal education or are entering 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade with no formal education. We wouldn't put a 4th grader in kindergarten. So that need for differentiation within a classroom, you're right, it is very challenging and something that teachers have to do. I do think that also goes to how teachers can support each other should you decide, being in a multilingual academy, being with an entire building of people that are kind of facing some of a similar challenge.
Yeah, we definitely couldn't trade them across classrooms because
Sure.
Spanish has 80,
I
going to
meant
be
from
80,
a collaborative
90%.
teaching
Yeah.
strategy standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to your question real quick, or your comment. All 3 of my sons have gone through Spanish, English, dual language, and unfortunately, they've had a great experience. But like my 4th grader right now is in a class of 27.
He's at 27 now,
I mean,
yes.
class sizes are huge in other places, so it's a real. It's not an easy decision or something to take lightly, but there's a harsh realities around that. That's tricky. It's just really hard. It's really hard. I would not want to be Dr. Ellie Tatum ever. It's really hard to run school districts right now, but because of all these different things. So, hands were in the back for a while.
She should go before me.
Go ahead.
Please correct me if I misunderstood the graph, but it looked like there were 11 EL students projected just from early childhood who would enter kindergarten, which means if we have a 50-50, that's 22 potential students. That's a full classroom.
In 2 years was the 11, and that star, as I had mentioned, were kids that are eligible.
Right.
What we know from historical happenings is that just because for next year 9 are eligible doesn't mean that all 9 will choose French DL. We know even within those 9, some that already have siblings at other buildings, some that already have siblings at private school. So between now and Kindergarten Connection, Lily and Marie over at Early Childhood will be communicating with these families to say, what are your plans? So what we had said during the presentation, that once we have definitive numbers, then we can make a definitive decision of should it be K1 or should K still be by itself.
So I don't understand still, just thinking about from staffing for next year, it sounds like we're going at it expecting there to be a K1 together instead of thinking positively like we want to build the program, so we're going to keep a kindergarten teacher, which it looks like we have enough to have a full classroom. It just looks like we're approaching it from a negative standpoint rather than trying to build what we're doing.
And I think that's a different way to look at it. Like I said, we can't make decisions definitively until we know for sure who is here and who is not here. But no staff members are being told until anything about placements or staffing, that it doesn't happen until, correct me if I'm wrong, Seema and Melanie, until the end of the year. Correct. Yeah. Yes, John, sorry. I'm looking at you and I think
Oh, yeah. So I don't know when people come for enrollment, and then there is a home language survey. Is there any rubric that say why it's beneficial to have that targeted language, or is just a survey? I think that if the parent know, they know why it's important to get that second language on the survey. For example, they will earn credits. So that would be a good strategy to bring them in the program, instead just asking if they speak another language other than English.
So the home language survey, the form we've been talking about, that's a federal form. So we don't ask anything additional on that. That form is laid out for us. But you're right, what we haven't done at Kindergarten Connection, and not necessarily even during parent forums, has started talking about the seal of biliteracy and what that means as a high schooler graduating. And I say that as a parent of littles, like I don't know that I would have been thinking about my 5-year-old being a senior.
And also, how are the teaching going to happen? Is that if, like, for example, second and third grade combined, is it going to be a time for second grade to learn and third grade to wait a little bit? And what's going to be third grade turn, first grade will wait? So how is the teaching going to happen?
Can I respond to
I
that?
will defer to John and Florence to kind of answer how they're doing that now.
So now I'm combining third and fourth. So most, for example, French, we have same lesson. So that what I'm teaching to fourth, it's the same that we are teaching to the third. But I make sure that when I give homework, they have different homeworks because the fourth graders, they are higher than the third graders. But topic like science, we have separate. Math, it's separate. So they are combining on the lesson like French, but other topic they are separate. They are really separated. We have other students working on their own while we are working with other grades. So it's just like we have 2 classes in one. So each of them we are following curriculum. They have separate curriculum. It is not combined.
John, and Lauren, is it getting easier to teach to 2 grades?
Easier than week 1, but it's still hard.
It's hard. It's hard. It's hard for monolingual class. I mean, splits are hard.
So I think we're lucky. I have the students that have been together since kindergarten. So they know how to support each other and they know how to behave. And that makes things, for me, it makes it easier.
Yeah, there are some benefits to it. I mean, there's a lot of concerns around it.
But if we could avoid it, we at all costs should avoid it. You know, grow the program, not let it shrink, so we can go back to normal, having 1 classroom per grade level, because it's really not helping them, and it's putting them at a disadvantage to do basically half the science curriculum, because we don't have double the amount of hours. We have to cut half the science topic of 1 grade to be able to cover half the science topic of the other grade. And I've been wondering next year, if I were to teach second and third, right now I'm trying to do science topics for second graders, so basically we skipped first. I was going to do that next year, but if we combine second and third and I'm with those, they'll have missed all the science and social studies topic from first grade altogether, you know. So yeah, keep switching back and forth what classes are combined, which ones are not, is not helpful for us as teachers for long-term planning. And having combined classrooms is definitely not something we should strive for the future. We should strive to be growing a program, not letting it dwindle, and keep adding more classrooms, you know, more grade levels per classroom.
Which actually brings me back to my point. I'm so happy that you said that, because there's a grander, and I know we all know this, but there's this grander moral issue, right? Is the institution of these programs is in part in place to disrupt cycles of opportunity loss. It's not just about, I want my kids to learn French and their minds will expand and this will be fantastic, and cultural sensitivity and everything else. It's about delivering language education to children that don't have it and helping their families along the way, many of whom have, as you said, advanced degrees and are working in jobs that are very low pay and hourly because they can't speak English, and it's hard to learn as an adult. And I speak as somebody who was bilingual and lost it, and we moved here from Montreal, and my daughter was starting to speak French, and that is the reason why we came here, so that she doesn't lose it, because my plan eventually is to go back. I'm at a disadvantage. I don't want that for my kids. And again, I say this from a position of privilege, but this is the reality that a lot of our community is dealing with. And so to keep that in mind when we're talking about combining these classes and cutting them and thinking about them from the aspect of, well, it won't be 22 students, it'll be 15.
Yeah, that's real. I appreciate you sharing all that. It's real. And the flip side of the coin is I'm appreciative that we're in a district that didn't already cut this program out because of low numbers, because most districts would have probably 2 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I totally agree with what you're saying. The intent behind dual language education, bilingual education, is to eradicate some of the years of systemic issues for minoritized communities, linguistically minoritized communities. And that's goes back to the point earlier around being very careful around program design, class splits as well, all of that, because it can easily shift to you're serving the wrong community's needs and requests.
I get you.
So it's very complicated.
Laura had a question from the chat, and then we'll take a pause if anyone wants to leave. Again, please take snacks with you to your children. Go ahead, Flo.
So there's a question here in the chat saying, will English speakers be turned away from kindergarten next year to allow for K1 split?
That goes back to the question earlier.
Yeah, so the number of English seats is always determined by the number of our French Lingala ELs. So until we have a definitive number of how many are enrolling from one language group, I cannot say how many seats will be available for the other language group.
But can you say that it will be the same?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I understand that, but say all 9 of the projected, I realize it's probably not 59 next year, but if there's 9 French students next year, would you forego English speakers so you could have a split K1 class? Or would you allow all the English speakers up to that 50-50 standard?
We don't have a definitive answer for that now. I think if we had 12 kindergarten kids and we wanted to maintain a two-way program, that would be a conversation we would have to have with Dr. Ivory Tatum and administration about making that its own class.
Yeah, we'd have to seek, I think she's still on, we'd have to seek district administration for
Because
that,
of money.
for that answer.
Is it
Sorry.
because of financial impact?
Yeah.
Is that the reason?
I think so, yeah, mostly.
Okay, so
I
we
just
will.
have one more thought. In response, and this came up in the committee I was in this summer, and Dr. Ivory Tatum mentioned it in her comment about making sure, or there becomes issues when some teachers get to teach smaller amounts of kids in their classroom. And I felt that in the committee this summer, some DPW, Wiley sentiments. And I guess I would hope that we just kind of handle that as adults, and it would agree that like smaller is always better, right? So financially, I understand that we can't have as small as classrooms as we'd like. We saw Wiley's data come back as higher performing, and they had significantly smaller classrooms. There could be other reasons. And we see the French program has small numbers, and they're performing well. And so I hope, and I think it's true in our program, I don't know that anybody with, 20 kids is upset that Madame Quavy has half as many. I think they're thankful that she has a small classroom, that she's teaching them to read and sending them well equipped into the next grade. So I can understand financial concerns in that, but, and that might, I felt the real consequences of it, but I would hope that we could look at the students and say, equity might say students that are immigrating here that need to learn 2 languages, as the 90% thing would state. Equity might say they need the smallest classrooms, right? So I'm okay if we say financially, we can't do classrooms of 10 perhaps, but I hope that maybe finances would be the only real reason that we would, not because teachers are upset that some kids get a smaller classroom.
Sure.
I'm just gonna play devil's advocate. I don't, because I love the smaller class sizes. I love the fact that Lucas and Caroline go to have like great interactions with their teachers. I think the issue is we're talking like 50% less. I mean, it's like it's not close to less. It's a lot less.
Yeah.
And that's. I mean, there's other kids in the district. You know what I mean? Like from a selfish standpoint, I would love it if they could go through a class like that.
If everybody could have that.
If everybody could have that, it'd be awesome. Yeah. I mean,
so to dissolve it because it's staff issues to me is different than saying I think we would all agree that would be best.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not fair financially and that kind of thing. But
And I do think that if everybody could have that plays into into other issues as well, the number of subs that we have in the district, the teacher shortage. In order
Oh, yeah,
for-
I know it's not
yeah.
actually possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
But there's still room to grow within the program, even with just English-speaking families, to add 2 kids and make the class size more palatable. So it's not a class size of 8, it's a class size of,
I think that's a
I
big.
mean, yeah, we can,
I think that's a big thing. Is getting
small goals that are achievable with the right kind of outreach.
Yeah, and I should say too, if it's not my child, then
No, I think it's
you know,
like
deserves the smaller classroom. Like,
getting like if you can increase those English, the native English language speaking, and I know you can. It's like the 50-50.
Or among either, I
that
mean,
are,
it
like-
would be amazing to have more French speakers.
Yeah,
as
that would
well.
be good
And
too.
then
I
that
think
would be
both
the
of them
best
are
case
possible.
scenario,
Right.
is to have more of both populations.
Yeah.
So I want just to say thank you because I know we have our discussion. We have here in Yankee Ridge French speakers, and we are the first French speakers. And then you are trying to do your best to bring this program and keep it. But I think we should be involved too. We as French speakers, we should be involved to bring more French speakers to talk about this program. So to find a way how we can bring even our friend, the one in Champaign. I know there is no way we can take students from Champaign to here. I personally, I had a kid. You wait for a year for him to be in the program. In the meantime, I think I did ask you a question. I don't know if I asked you the question. If we would have someone from Champaign come here. So we may have parents in Champaign waiting for their children to start school, but the lack of communication, or they don't really know what to do. Or we may have the same parent, the same situation here in Urbana. So how we can reach out to those parents? So I'm open. I'm doing the
task force.
I'm doing the Facebook Live anytime, and then I have too many followers. So if there is any suggestion, if we have any idea where we can have more people, I know that we came from Congo, they came from different French speaker country in Africa. So if we have, I'm open to have students that can come if parents can allow us to do that. English speaker that speak French, if they can come to do my show even once a week, once a month, they can speak in French. So that's maybe something that will push parents to bring more students to this program. Any suggestion that you have for us to be involved, I will talk to my community as I already did, but I will keep talking to them. And then if there is any other suggestion, let me know. I know how to reach all those Congolese families.
Are we allowed to have contact information for the 9 that are eligible to join in kindergarten, or not really?
No, you really, as a staff member, you should only be contacting your own students.
Yeah.
But I think having a broader community type setting where people can be invited to participate, or even an online webcast, John, that's definitely something that we can talk about, how we can do that.
Could you invite them to join, to observe our classrooms any day that they
I think
want
whenever
to?
we schedule an open house, absolutely.
That may change the
Those are
9.
public, so.
Because 9, if we had 9 plus 9, 18, that's a full kindergarten class almost, you know?
Possibly, yeah.
If we could keep those from leaving to other schools.
And also, Ms. Lope, we can find a way how to reach other communities, because we don't have only Congolese community in Champaign. We have a very big Cameroon community. They are from Togo, Benin. We have a lot of countries that speak French in Africa, and we have to find the ways how we can reach out to them and how they can bring students.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh wow, il est midi déjà.
Il est midi? Oui, wow.